set unmute. It's set unmute.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we pay our respects and talk about a remarkable man, Dr. Henrik Eger. We're going to have a few people who knew Henrik and who would like to share some stories about him speak. We're going to have some musicians who he loved play some music that he would have loved. I'll give a brief eulogy. And we're going to open up the floor afterwards for anyone who would like to say anything. If that's you, raise your hand in the Zoom call. If you're shy and want to just say a written memorial to him, written memories, just do that in the chat box. So thank you for joining us tonight. If you have any questions, any memories, please share them in the chat. And remember Henrik. Going to get started with our first speaker, Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone see me or hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. It's quite a privilege to be here amongst you all to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Henrik Eger, PhD, teacher, friend, critic, writer. He wore so many hats, and I think it's appropriate that so many people have gathered here together in order to summarize who Henrik was, because not one person could ever capture the truest essence of who Henrik is, was, and ever shall be in the minds of all who had ever met him. I'm just going to go over my personal recollections of Henrik, and once again, that is from my perspective. And I'm sure many of you will probably reflect and relate to some of the things I say, and I apologize if it becomes redundant. Henrik and I had first met in 2007. I was speaking at an event in 2006. He and I were both involved in Toastmasters for a number of years. He much prior to myself, and he had founded Toastmasters meetings at, if I'm not mistaken, in Chicago. The written and spoken word were very important to Henrik. They were jewels, they were the capstones, they were the lifeblood of who Henrik was and always would be. When we had the opportunity to attend a party, actually, he had the opportunity to attend the party. He was in the company of a lady who had the most regal bearing and a magnificent and marvelous speaking voice. Henrik would always mention that he had a choppy German accent that he despised, and he certainly wanted to speak in such a high and noble manner as this lady. He soon, and I don't know how he pulled it off, he was able to adopt that accent, and he never went out of character, and it became a part of who Dr. Henrik Eger was. Henrik obviously had a brilliant mind. He was a voracious writer. He was kind. He was brusque. He was honest, often to the times of being brutally so. His main focus was to help his students to move beyond what they thought they both had been, and also help them to realize and to understand that potential is an innate quality of every single person ever born. But he also emphasized that potential and potential realized are two different things. And he hoped that potential realized would be something that they would ultimately obtain. I had the privilege to be invited into Henrik's classroom on many occasions. He gave me the liberty to conduct Toastmaster-like meetings at Delaware Community College, both at the primary campus and also the satellite campuses. Henrik always insisted that his students dress in business professional attire. Not that I was anyone special, but he wanted to have them prepared to what future life lay ahead of them, and that he wanted them to put their best foot forward always. When we would have those Toastmasters meetings, I would ask questions such as, if you could have dinner with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why? Things of that nature would pique their interest, and I had seen students who would never even utter a single word or raise their hand to answer a question. They would metamorphosize, they would blossom, they would bloom, they would find their voice, and they would be able to contribute in such a way that was just simply nothing short of a miracle. I would leave that classroom so thankful and so appreciative that I had that opportunity to see people change literally in the course of 1 hour. Henrik would say to me, Michael, I don't know what you brought to the table, but things changed. The dynamic of the room was totally different once you left. It was only because he gave me that opportunity to speak and participate. I did nothing. I just was simply a conduit that was directly a part of who Dr. Henrik Eger was. Henrik and I had spent many evenings, and I'm sure many of you also had the opportunity to do so, at the theater, public engagements, galas, and one of his most favorite events, his annual Victorian party. He would announce it in June or July. He would announce it in August, September, October, November. I think you get the idea. But he always wanted to make sure that he let everyone know that he was going to have a Victorian party in his palace in Upper Darby. And for those artists, actresses, actors, poets, musicians, Ingrid, Jack, anyone who is willing to step forward, Henrik ensured that they would have to sing for their supper. No one got a free ride. Henrik wanted to see people come out of their comfort zone and step forward. And that was just simply who he was. He wanted us to be able to find our voices and to use them. We all have a voice, and he believed every single person was important. Also to mention, every social event that I ever witnessed and was attending with Henrik, he became the sun. He was the focal point of every gathering, and anyone around him was simply a satellite in orbit to the power and the energy and the vibrancy of Dr. Henrik Eger. And I'm sure that many of you can attest to this. And sometimes Henrik was, quite frankly, could latch on and simply not want to relinquish and let's say encouraging people who both were seasoned professionals and those especially who were budding artists. He wanted the best for everyone, and he was always well-intentioned. Henrik and I had the opportunity to celebrate wonderful, joy-filled occasions, and he was also present in many sad ones in my life. He and I had collaborated on the eulogy when my twin brother committed suicide in 2007. He attended that service. Henrik was there on many occasions to my mother and father's house for Thanksgiving. He was there for birthdays and so forth and so on. He knew that the holidays were a very sad time for me and absolutely inconsequential. But he knew that he would try to draw me out of that self-imposed exile. He was there for my father's funeral. He and I collaborated on my mother's funeral, where she had witnessed the most horrific of events that Henrik always encouraged me to investigate. I can see him always arriving, as he would say, appropriately late, and I can see him on tiptoes looking at me directly in the eye and nodding his approval as I was able to capture the life, the essence of my mother. He was proud of me, and I was thankful to win over Henrik's approval was not an easy thing to do, and I'm so thankful that I was able to. I have noticed that I see Kathy Batista on this call, and I wanted to acknowledge it, Kathy. Henrik and I have shared over 1,300 emails at last count. I was involved heavily in the writings and the creative processes of many people, unbeknownst to them perhaps. Henrik valued my opinion, but he also valued the effort, the care, the love that you brought into his household. You were his right-hand lady, and you made his life much more than it would have been without your presence. And I thank you for that, Kathy. Same could be said with anyone who I'm not aware of and who have never met, but we're all here for the same reason, to honor Dr. Henrik Eger. Henrik and I were not Facebook friends. We were friends in the truest sense of the word. I have had many conversations that started at 12:30 a.m. and lasted until 3 p.m. I had been involved in many, many things with Henrik that will not be spoken of. I had the opportunity to gaze upon his noble bearing, to be the truest last person who would ever see Henrik Eger. I thanked him silently for the opportunities to share his life, to share his legacy, and I will be forever grateful for the times that Henrik shared his life with me. I thank you all for the opportunity to be the first one to speak, and I look forward to all the words and accolades that those will contribute on his behalf and in his memory. And I look forward to the music as well. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Henrik.
Hello, what's going on here?
We can hear you, Judy. Now you're on mute.
Am I showing up either?
We can see you and hear you. Please say your...
Okay.
Yes.
I cannot see anything, but thank you. And thank you for also the honor of sharing today and my memories of Henrik. I put it together this way. Henrik helped me dance again. It was New Year's Eve in 2012, I believe. And it was my very first party since being struck by a woman running a red light, demolishing my car, my pelvis, and part of my spine so badly that doctors told me I'd never walk again. The party, an annual event in Swarthmore at John and Ingrid's Victorian house, was my big test. Could I ever dance again, or were the doctors right? A dapper gentleman of a certain age stepped up, took me in his arms, and proceeded to twirl me across the dance floor, holding me firmly, giving me support to let myself float freely, gradually letting myself relax and surrender to the music, recapturing my dancing self. What freedom after so long in hospitals and rehab clinics. The new year looked a lot more positive after that dim medical view, and it's been uphill ever since, thanks in part to the gallant gentleman, Henrik Eger. That festive night, I asked him where he'd been when World War II ended in his birth country, Germany. After exchanging stories of that day, we declared we were twins, born only 2 years apart, and our friendship was sealed. He described being with his mother in an open field, I think in Bavaria, but I'm not sure. And she was carrying his sister, who was a baby, wrapped in a white shawl. There was an American plane flying overhead, and I guess the mother was afraid that they might shoot them. So she unwrapped the baby, took the white shawl off, and was waving it overhead as the American plane went overhead. And in that moment, they knew that the war was over and that they were free. And I described it being in America, coming out into our housing project and people beating pots and shooting off guns in the street, and it was all celebration. We both had been very touched, even though we were only little kids. It really touched us. I accompanied Henrik to many theater openings. What a wonderful compliment he gave me one time when he said, I was his eye candy, which was a wonderful compliment for an 80-year-old woman. I loved it. And of course, his annual Victorian holiday party, which Mike explained, a chance for many of us to dress up and show our stuff, where many significant connections were made. Losing Henrik made a big hole in many of our lives. For me, he was a trusted editor who gave me encouraging feedback, someone whose laughter filled theaters. He had a unique laugh, who loved helping people, whether they wanted it or not, and who engaged almost everyone he met, curious and interested in their lives, their families, their art. He loved, as I did with the people I worked with, inspiring people to creativity. He loved dressing up in his a bit too tight tux and giving people the special gifts he'd selected for them. My house is full of little tiny Henrik treasures. His house was a treasure trove of valuable art and whimsical junk. His garden displayed the most beautiful camellia bush, whose blossoms highlighted spring every year. I think I'm going to miss that bush almost as much as Henrik. A man of great education and experiences, His career spanned the globe, and he was always hosting visitors from around the world. He spoke frequently about how he wanted to set up a foundation for theater students at Swarthmore College. But alas, he never filed the paperwork. A reminder to all of us that we need to take care of our end-of-life issues while we still have our health. Now his beloved dog Nico is with a family with children, though he will no doubt forever love Henrik, as we all will love and miss this unique, remarkable man I was proud to call a friend who helped me dance again. In our last conversation, the day he had his heart attack, I told him I had an idea. I was going to try to find a literary agent for a new book. And he was very excited. And he made me promise him that before I sent off any query letters, I would let him review it. I made that promise to him. I'm not sure if he's going to be looking over my shoulder when I finally get around to that. Henrik loved fun, he loved beauty, and he was always open. His heart, which I guess gave out eventually, his heart was a big one. And we were all lucky to have experienced his love and his appreciation. Thank you, Henrik. I hope you like what we've put together here for you. Thank you.
You're on, Susan.
Okay, I first met Henrik around 1985 when we were both Barrymore nominators and judges. We would meet at the theater and see a show and then comment on it afterwards. It wasn't long until I invited him for Shabbat dinners and a Passover Seder in my home, where he was introduced to matzo ball soup, gefilte fish, potato latkes, and of course, Jewish theater. I introduced him to an organization called Theater Ariel, which is the Jewish theater in Philadelphia. And it wasn't long until he became an active board member. I next introduced him to the Association for Jewish Theater, which is now called the Alliance for Jewish Theater, or goes by AJT. And again, he became active. He joined us on a trip to Vienna, where he met a lot of people, including Theodor Bickel and Mati Sandek, who he remained friends with for the rest of their lives or his life. And he was infused with Jewish theater and everything it stood for. He actually wrote plays, and one of the plays was used in a conference for the Alliance for Jewish Theater, and later became Metronome Ticking, which he did with my brother-in-law, Bob Spitz. Jewish theater has always been a part of his life, and the people he met through Theater Ariel and AJT remain friends. Henrik, may your memory be a blessing.
she's still on.
You're on, Bob.
Okay. I was expecting to see myself. I guess I don't.
We see
going
you.
Okay. I'm going to talk about the wonderful experience that Henrik and I had, along with my wife, Gloria, when we traveled to Hamburg, Germany, to perform metronome ticking. On November 6th, 2008, Henrik Eger and I, along with my wife, Gloria, took a 5-day trip to Germany where we performed the dramatic reading of metronome ticking at 4 different venues in the city of Hamburg. Here's a brief history of what led up to that trip. Henrik was the only non-Jew on the board of directors of Theater Ariel, a Jewish theater company in Philadelphia. In early 2006, Henrik came to our house to attend the board meeting. When Henrik and I started talking after the meeting, we discovered we had several things in common. Henrik spoke German, I speak German. In spite of his British accent, Henrik grew up in Germany. I lived in Italy with my Austrian parents until age 5. Henrik was born on November 9, 1941. I was born November 18, 1941. Henrik had 500 letters that his father had written to his wife during World War II. My mother wrote her memoirs covering her life during the war. Henrik told me that he had wanted to write a play using his father's letters as material. How would you feel about my writing a play combining my father's letters and your mother's memoirs? He asked me. I agreed. And he spent much of the rest of that year working on that. But first, he needed help reading his father's letters, which were handwritten in a German script called Sütterlin. Henrik could not read Sütterlin's script because it was not taught in German schools after 1941. Help came from a group of retired people in Hamburg, whose hobby was to transcribe old documents written in the Sütterlin script into Latin script. Henrik sent them his father's letters, and after some time, the letters came back in a readable format. Henrik called me shortly after he read the transcribed letters. My God, he said, my father was a Nazi. Henrik read the letters and my mother's memoirs and extracted material from each that showed the extreme contrast between the life of a propaganda officer for the German army and a Jewish woman and her husband and young son hiding from the Germans in Italy. The contrast is dramatic. My mother wrote about hiding from German soldiers while living in a hayloft of an Italian farm. Henrik's father wrote about commandeering a magnificent French villa and eating dinner at a table set with saucers and fine napkins. Henrik's idea for the script was that when performing, I would read those portions that he took from my mother's memoirs, and he would read the excerpts from his father's letters. But he felt very strongly that halfway through the script, we would switch roles. I would read his father's letters, and he would read my mother's memoirs. During the latter part of 2007, we performed metronome ticking 4 times in the Philadelphia area, mostly at synagogues. Then in early 2008, Henry got an invitation from the group that had transcribed his father's letters to come to Hamburg and perform metronome ticking there in German. We were, of course, very excited, and Henrik now had to translate the entire script. The date of the visit was the weekend of November 9, Henrik's birthday, and the 70th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, when 267 German, Austrian, and Czech synagogues were burned. We were to be part of the commemoration of that event in Hamburg. We were greeted at the airport by Peter Hohn, the head of the group that transcribed the 500 letters. The next morning, Peter arrived punctually at the pension where we stayed and told us that he had arranged for us to join the head of the Jewish community for an interview at a radio station. Shortly after we arrived at the station, the interview began. After speaking for a few minutes with the head of the Jewish community, the interviewer asked Henrik and me about our backgrounds and our stories. It was quite exciting. And by the way, when answering the interviewer's first question, Henrik spoke uninterrupted for 20 minutes. Peter then took us to lunch, where we met his group of about 30 transcribers, retired men and women, who donate the proceeds of their transcribing work to a retirement community affiliated with a Lutheran church. Our first performance for the weekend was in the auditorium of the church. During lunch, Henrik was very considerate towards Gloria by translating into English for her the conversation at our table. The performance began and I was a bit nervous. I'm fluent in conversational German, but all the German I had ever learned was from my parents, and some of the words in the script came from Henrik's father and were not part of my speaking vocabulary. In our Philadelphia performances, when we finished the reading, there was always a brief pause, and then the audience began to applaud. This time, it was different. When we finished, there was dead silence for what seemed to me a long time. I was stunned. But then it suddenly occurred to me that this audience, which consisted mostly of people in their 70s and 80s, had been children and teenagers during the late 1930s and early 1940s. They were there. To break the silence, Henrik started talking about how his father had written and maintained daily journals for 9 years, and how when many years later he told his mother that he wanted her to give those journals to him because he was considering publishing them, she threw them all into an incinerator. Then slowly the questions and comments began. One man told how when he was 12 years old, a classmate invited him to a concentration camp where his father was director. He had seen the inmates there with the various patches on their prison uniforms, the yellow stars for the Jews, and so on. And he believed that these people all belonged there because all he knew was what he was told. He was 4 years old when Hitler came to power, and all that he was exposed to was what the Nazis told him. And after the war, no one spoke about the past. Not his parents, not the school, no one. The youth, he said, can be very easily swayed. And he thought it important that today's youth hear our story. All the comments from the audience were very positive. They said they were moved by the story and felt it was important for today's kids to hear it. Sunday was November 9, the anniversary of Kristallnacht. So there were local dignitaries who spoke before our next performance at the Jewish Community Cabaret. Before we went on stage, a reporter and a photographer from a large Hamburg newspaper interviewed Henrik and me. The article with a large picture of us appeared in the paper the next day. The performance went better than the first, and the audience again was moved. Gloria, who was seeing the performance for the 6th time and who doesn't understand German, was in tears when Henrik took off his vest and I put it on as we switched roles. A block away is the Talmud Torah Realschule, a Jewish day school. It was reopened 3 years earlier in the same building that was in use under the same name in 1938. That evening, we attended a memorial service in the auditorium of the school. The next morning, we were in the auditorium again. This time, Henrik and I were on the stage before 250 students and their teachers from nearby high schools. Probably none of them was Jewish. The auditorium was the same place where exactly 70 years earlier, the SS had arrived in the morning and ordered all the teachers and upper school students to assemble. The teachers were subsequently arrested and taken to concentration camp. German students study the Holocaust every year from grade 5 to grade 10. The subject probably very meaningful to the students because so many of them are immigrants from Turkey, from Portugal, from Russia, and other Asian countries. During the performance, the kids were quiet and seemed attentive. That evening, we did our final performance at a public high school. Again, Peter Hohn had made the arrangements. Afterwards, two 15-year-olds came to talk to us. One was German, the other had a Turkish or Arabic name. The German boy told me that he had seen movies and read books about the Holocaust, but that this play made the events so much more real because of our relationship to the characters. I felt like this was Henrik's and my contribution to Tikkun Olam, that's a Hebrew expression, a conviction from old Jewish writings, that it is our responsibility to help repair the world. Thank you. And I appreciated knowing Henrik and his contribution to my life and to Gloria's life.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I first wanted to thank everyone else for sharing their stories and memories of Henrik. And this is something that I wrote for him. It's called For Henrik, Losing My Creative Father and a Real Mensch. Forgive my German. He wrote me an email in German, so I'm going to try to read it. Liebe Tina, vielen Dank für deine Hilfe. Many thanks for your help and your new outlook. You've come a long way. Keep up your good work, and avoiding alcohol, your enemy. Bis Samstag, till Saturday, Henrik. After nearly 3 years of working with him, this was the last email I received from Henrik on December 30th, 2020 at 6:41 p.m. I first met Henrik in early 2018. I had applied for an editorial assistant internship with Drama Around the Globe, an ad which I found on Craigslist. When I met him in person for the interview, his beautiful and museum-like house surprised me. Then, after a couple of hours with him, I found him a bit odd and slightly abrasive. I'm a shy person, and at the time, I was returning to school after a few years, so my skills weren't exactly up to par. But he still offered me the internship, and we began working together. At first, his direct way of speaking came off as critical, and I cried a lot. Henrik really didn't pull any punches, as they say. He always spoke his mind. If he had anything, it was chutzpah. He might even be described as boisterous, or as millennials like myself say, extra. Over time, I think we both grew. He softened up a bit. And perhaps I toughened up and started to realize that he was helping me become a better writer and editor, as well as a better person. As we all know, Henrik loved his arts and antiques. He would say, I sell one thing just so I could buy another to replace it. Often, when he sold an item, he would comment on his house, Buckingham Palace in Upper Darby, being Japanese empty, as if minimalism could ever be associated with Henrik. But writing and editing were his true passion. And he told me the last time I saw him, on December 30th, 2020, how he wanted to focus more on writing his own stories and plays in the new year to come. I learned a great deal about researching, writing, and the editing process from him, except how to keep text under 1,000 words. I suppose what I take away the most is how he wanted me to be an active participant in life and engage people and connect with them, something everyone here and everyone whose life he impacted around the world proved he did with them. He always told me to come into my own and not be a gray mouse in the corner. Such harsh words I once thought, but words that resonate with me, and I think always will. Perhaps I wouldn't have the courage to write this piece if he didn't say that. In the final months of his life, he often called us a team, and even once said I was like a daughter to him, to think of him as my creative father, always pushing me forward. He cared about me when he really didn't have to, especially despite my struggles with alcohol. There was no reason other than for the betterment of my life, but isn't that what a teacher does? And isn't that what a father does? Henrik wrote and spoke often of timelessness. Perhaps that was the place he believed people went after death, especially as he described himself as a happy agnostic. I like to believe that he is reunited with his first Cocker Spaniel, his beloved Jagger, and his family, mother, father, and sister, drifting on into such timelessness. And we here, the ones who carry on, can remember the writer, the editor, the teacher, the friend, the man and the mensch who we knew as Henrik. Thank you, and I just wanted to say thank everyone for being here, and Henrik as well for the way he impacted my life.
Ingrid and I have a musical duo and we play as Last Chance. And Henrik was very supportive of us, always. And one evening we had a job at the Marple Library, and I knew that Henrik was a Toastmaster, so we asked him to introduce our act that night. And Henrik did that. He showed up and he introduced our act. And as you know, Henrik loved to talk. And our introduction went on and on. And the next thing we know, Henrik was telling the story of how he left Germany and came to the United States. And I turned to Ingrid and I said, remember when this used to be about us? But here's a song that Henrik never heard, but I think he would have liked it. Now the gentle footsteps fall. Now the light moves to the shade, and the shadows on my wall soon will fade. Now the colors that I knew from the candle's lonely flame turn from red to distant blue, speak my name. Bedside angel I still see, I can feel you when you're close to me. Bedside angel, midnight run, stay and touch me till the new day comes, till the new day comes. Now the voices that I hear, listen carefully until one by one they disappear and all is still. Bedside angel I still see, I can feel you when you're close to me. Bedside angel, midnight run, stay and tell me if the new day comes, if the new day comes. Bedside angel, steady me. You are my comfort when you're close to me. Bedside angel, you must know when it's time for you to let me go. Just let me go.
Oh, goodness. Those were some beautiful tributes. Thank you all for your words. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. In preparing this service and preparing what I was going to say and the obituary I wrote, I thought about Henrik and what I would miss of Henrik. I remember walking up to his door and the heartfelt greetings he would give, his support for me, for artists, actors, people, for their work, for especially early in their careers, his house that he treasured, his insight and his energy, even when that energy could be a little overwhelming. His Victorian holidays and the Christmases he would spend with me and my family. I realized that I would miss much and that the world lost a rare soul when we lost Henrik. I could see that tonight in the testimonies that people gave and the stories that they told, that he touched many others like he touched me. In the tributes that people left to him on his Facebook page, over 400, he touched former students who remembered him as a demanding and supportive professor. He touched people in the arts and in the theater who remembered his support for them, his always boosting his energy and enthusiasm. He touched people who loved his writing and the insightful words he would have. He touched people who only saw his political Facebook posts and looked for his intelligence and point of view there. He touched people who he met just once and people who knew him for decades. He touched people, his neighbors in Upper Darby and people around the world. I only knew Henrik for the last decade of his life, but he would tell stories, and so I felt like I knew him his whole life in some ways. The stories that Susan told, that Bob told, Judy told, of his past. In some ways, he was a window into a vanishing past that we're only going to read about in history books, but that Henrik lived. His father had a lasting impression on him, his time in Iran at the revolution, his childhood and the deprivation of post-war Germany. We would have Christmas parties where Henrik, as someone said, he was always unignorable, the center of attention. And he would tell this tragic story of an early post-war Christmas when his sister and him were singing and his mother and his grandmother were crying for the losses. I will miss his stories. I regret not prompting them more and not remembering them more. We would often tell of his travel around the world. He was proud of working for Martin Luther King in the 60s. Someone said he was a real Renaissance man. He wasn't a religious person, so he wouldn't want me to say he's in a better place. But the important thing for Henrik was that he made this world a better place. He saw the good in people, in what they did, in what they created, and he was lavish in his praise and his support. He saw the evil in the world that took place in his childhood and that continued into the present, and he was passionate in his criticism. I'm glad he got to see the 2020 election, and I wonder what he would have thought of the events in DC last week. He warned us. It's a tragedy for such a social person that this was the last year of his life, that I haven't seen him in going on a year now, that he couldn't have his Victorian holiday this year. But I am honored to have known him, and I think I can speak on behalf of many people that the world was a better place for having Henrik in it. And thank you all for joining. If you'd like to say a few words, you can raise your hand in this Zoom chat. I'm also going to post a link to a post-service reception if you want to join us and say a few informal words there. Thank you very much. Remember Henrik.
Okay, I think I'm on. Dear Henrik.
You're on.
Dear Henrik, I'm going to miss you so much. I miss your support with the music, that you supported us with our music. You attended our concerts. You invited us to your home, to those famous Victorian holiday parties. You brought us out of our shells. You encouraged us to perform for everyone in the room. You gave us connections. I'm thankful for having met you, Henrik. I'm going to play a little song that Henrik loved to hear. He requested it now and then. It touched his heart, and it's called The Yiddish Mama.
Thank you. Do we have anyone who would like to say some words? Kashef. Kashef, if you'd like to turn on and say something. Or Christine, if you'd like to begin. Mitchell?
Okay, thank you. I
Oh,
want
thank
to
you,
thank
Christine.
Chris, for putting the memorial together. This was really beautiful today. I've known Henrik for a very long time on Facebook. I'm a human rights and peace activist with a worldwide following of almost 70,000 people now. And it seems like Henrik was always with me. I was very impressed with the posts that he put on my page, and I would always circulate them widely on the various pages that I had so that people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Egypt and South America and South Africa could see what he was writing. He always did an interesting analysis on before he posted. And he did speak often about his upbringing in Germany, and he warned us over and over again about the danger that Trump posed to our country. I too wonder what he would have thought of this past week or two. I'm very grateful for having known him. He was a very just person, very kind. He was very interesting with the posts that he posted and the comments that he made. I miss him terribly on our pages. Thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be invited here today and share my memory, and I loved hearing what everybody else had to say. A few months ago, he invited me down to his house. He told me that he had a very large house and I would be very comfortable. I could stay as long as I wanted, but I was in no position to take a vacation. And I thanked him, but I didn't know about all of his background with the parties and all until I heard all of you. Just about 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, he posted on my pages that he was going to have an estate sale, and he offered a lot of his possessions were available for sale if any of us that were on the pages would like to come and buy them. So I will miss him. He was a very unique person, and I was very, very glad to know him for as long as I did. Thank you very much. Nice to be here with all of you too.
Thank you, Christine. Kashef, would you like to say a few words?
Can you guys see me and hear me?
We can hear you. Can you turn the video on?
Yes, it is on.
Mitchell? Yes.
Yes. Hi, guys. Thank you very much for this great opportunity. It's an honor for me to say a few words about my dear friend Henrik. Although we had never met in person, I was one of those lucky guys that met him on Facebook when I was living in Miami and then in New Jersey. Right now I'm in Canada. But we had a lot in common, and it's needless to say that, not only a great writer, author, poet, he was a wonderful human being. And, we used to have a lot of conversations as I come from the Middle East, and he had spent some time in the Middle East, especially in Iran, UAE. So he shared his experiences with me. And since I am also trying to be a writer and I'm published 5 books, so I've written something specially for Henrik. It'll just take a couple of minutes and I will read it out to you guys. The poem is called For Henrik, obvious reasons. In the journey of life, one comes across different faces. There are only a few ones who leave deep and invisible traces. I've been fortunate enough to know someone who acted like a guiding force at every turn. Whoever said that age is a barrier in friendship must have failed to learn the trick. Known by his family and friends as Henrik, our candid conversations would always click. The information that we shared together, all the happiness if I were to gather, cannot make up for the experience I had with you altogether. It cannot fill up the hole as your demise on us has taken its toll. You were the kind of father I never had. I would not be lying if I considered you as my friendly dad. I cannot vouch for the rest of the world. Most of you in person did meet. I unfortunately never did. Despite that, many a times you made up for the void by caring and doing the things you did. As tears tumble down my eyes, a strong feeling sinks in that your absence will always act as a void in all our lives. It's you we will always miss and you will never forget. I'm so thankful to fate that we met. As I sincerely hope that my thoughts and your memories will help me meet you again, my prayers and love for you will never cease. My dear Henrik, may you rest in peace. Thank you.
So, am I on, Chris?
Yes, you are.
Thanks. And thanks, Kashef. Good job.
My
So I found my last email exchange with Henrik. We had plans to meet for his 80th birthday. I keep imagining his voice saying, wonderful, wonderful. I love the accolades. It's a pity, though, that no one can applaud over Zoom. One of the photos in the montage audio was from my wedding. My beautiful bride, still beautiful bride, was on the left and her sister is on the right. I met Henrik as his assistant in 2005. Not a great time in my life. I was between careers. He wanted a well-read writer researcher, and I figured I was adequate at either. A bit nonplussed by each other at first. His computer was organized like a file cabinet, the A folder, the B folder, and so on. But over time, I started to see him as the Victorian scholar and uncle I think we all want in our lives. He was the professor I once wanted to be. I suppose he saw me as tech support, but was still delighted to hear from him. My father, who also valued books and clear language and raised me to share those values, died in 2018. And I'm glad he and Henrik got to meet. I like to think that they're catching up somewhere. Thanks for letting me talk.
Susan?
Yes, hello. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Good. I have known Henrik since 1983. I'm the Susan from Chicago that maybe you've heard of. We were dear, dear friends. I have called Henrik my best friend ever since I met him. And that's primarily because I could tell Henrik everything, and I did. I never felt I needed to hold back. I come from a rough background in childhood. It was some very shameful things happened, but they weren't my shame. And Henrik helped me to see that. Henrik and a lot of therapists, but seriously, his acceptance went so far into my psyche. I have loved him as a brother, as a dear friend all this time, and we've always been in touch. He wrote a magnificent poem when I was carrying my babies. I have quadruplets, and he wrote all about that, called them 4 Young Trees. And he also wrote a poem for my husband when he died. He named him the American Sisyphus, pushing the stone up the mountain every day and destined to return to do it the very next day, and said that Rob had just worn out. He wrote another poem when my son Joshua died. All these things are in drama around the globe. And I've got to remember to copy them off of there in case that website someday is no more. I'd never thought of Henrik not being here. Kashef, I think you said he leaves a void in all of our lives. And that is so very true for me. I've been his guest in Philadelphia in that beautiful Victorian palace twice. And I truly thought I had a third visit left in me. The last was in 2018. I will cherish him forever. And I cherish all of you, every one of you, whether you've spoken or not. The fact that we've all loved him and been loved by him is a magnificent tribute to who he is and who he will continue to be as he lives on in our lives. He did make the world a better place, and I pray that he is in a better place too. So God bless you all, and I'll sign off. Thanks for letting me share.
Peggy, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, my camera's not coming on for some reason, but yes. Oh, there we go. Okay. Henrik, my Facebook feed or my Facebook memories since he died, every day there's memories from Henrik that come up in my Facebook memories, either comments he made or things he tagged me in or things he would just send me that were always so supportive. I said to know Henrik was to have him as your champion and your cheerleader. He was always so supportive of my acting. And Henrik, along with his political posts on Facebook, he had a quirkiness on Facebook that some of us would find amusing. Henrik had this habit of going back in your pictures years, and he'd comment on them where he liked them. One night, I started getting all these notices that Henrik was liking comments from when my ankle had been broken 7.5 years previous. And I said to him, Henrik, you do realize when you like people's comments that they get a notice, and people may find that strange. The 7.5 years later, you're liking their comments. And he said, well, I was just trying to be supportive and sympathetic. And that was Henrik. He was supportive and sympathetic, even if it was 7.5 years too late. He was a dear, lovely man. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that he's gone. Every time I think of it, it's new news. I'm a little surprised that it's actually hit me as hard as it has. He was very special, and there really will never be anyone again like Henrik. His support for all the people in the theater community was just amazing and just so, so strong. He believed in all of us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves. And I will miss him terribly. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I put a link to a reception afterwards on Zoom if you'd like to join us. And we're going to conclude with a slideshow from some moments of Henrik's life. Thank you all. Take care.